Senator Cramer, welcome back to Point of View. Thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us. Let's start with our great farmers. You know, we've had the ink start to dry in some of these trade deals, phase one of China, the USMCA, but I think there's still some concern about, hey, when are we going to see some orders? Do you have any updates on that for us?
I don't, Chris, other than obviously China, we've hit a pretty serious bump in the road. In fact, I was thinking about the timing of the signing of it. As you know, I was sitting there in the front row in the White House with the president signing the deal with the vice premier of China, all the while not knowing, at least Americans not knowing what was going on in China with regard to the coronavirus. And so clearly China's got some other issues that they're dealing with. At the same time, Chris, even while they're dealing with that, I assume they're still eating, and people need to continue to eat. So I've been disappointed in the lag time, if you will, on seeing some larger orders from China. But remembering that our president still has some leverage with them, he's kept the tariffs on. So I would expect that that it shouldn't be too long. But I don't have any personal updates on anything that I've heard.
I want to get into the coronavirus in a moment, the impact that might have on ag, but also I want to go here on our sister station, K-Fire out of Bismarck, did a story yesterday saying that, hey, some farmers are going, hey, the MFP payments now are done. We might need another program. I want to share with you a little bit about that story and give you a chance to respond, sir.
Sure.
Farmers say they've helped get through the rough years. Markets remain a problem, and now some are calling for another program.
This impact on demand is going to be with us minimum of 5 years when you talk to ag economists. So to think that, well, we signed a trade deal, the market dropped, we're done with the MFP type payment. Again, I'm not sure I like that style.
Senator, that was Mark Watney, the president. I mean, it sounds like you've got a reaction. I mean, is there a stomach for another farm program?
Well, there's a few things, and I hadn't heard this before, so I just heard it for the first time here, but I'm frankly, a little bit taken back, because to suggest somehow that we need to continue to have programs while we're also doing trade deals. Remember the MFP program that ran 2 years, and farmers just received the third tranche, or they're in the process of receiving the third tranche. The third tranche wasn't even guaranteed after the trade deal was signed, but because there's been this lag in large orders and purchases, that sort of gave the green light to Secretary Perdue to go ahead and pay out the third tranche. But at the end of the day, you have to have some willing buyers and willing sellers, making deals. You can't just continue to grow crops and increase supply without a demand. So we're going to continue to work on the demand side, remembering that the president's going to India later this month to work on a trade deal. He's in negotiations, early negotiations with the United Kingdom. Still trying to work on the European Union to accept agricultural products as part of a European Union deal. So we need to really focus there and start moving the product along. And now our farmers have been hard hit, not just by the down cycle of price, which has been going on now for some time, and then, of course, the tariffs from China on the trade deal. But in addition to that, we have this horrible weather, and a lot of our corn and other crops, some of them never coming out of the field, of course. Some of them that should have been out last fall won't get out until this spring. So there's a lot of additional pressure that we understand and know about. But to suggest, by the way, as I heard him, I think I heard him say that this is going to be a demand problem for 5 years. I think he might have missed the details of the China trade deal. In the China trade deal, the president included immediate purchases as part of the negotiation. And when I say immediate purchases, I don't mean historical purchases. I mean double or more what they've historically purchased of agricultural products in China. So I think obviously we have a little hiccup with China. It's not a little hiccup, it's a major problem with regard to this coronavirus. I don't think anybody even knows how bad that could be yet. But I'm not ready to give up and start coming up with new programs. Remember, we also have a farm bill that includes the ultimate safety net in crop insurance for farmers that we pitched, as you know, Chris, as the safety net that would be necessary in normal circumstances, so that we don't have to have so many ad hoc relief programs. In addition to that, we did do some ad hoc disaster relief bills, including this WIP Plus program. So there's a lot out there. We need to sell more product.
Well, and I think that's the rub, sir, is because I think that right now farmers are dealing with so much uncertainty. You mentioned the weather and all those things, and you just mentioned, hey, maybe he missed phase one of the China trade deal. It's supposed to be immediate, and I asked you when of the orders are going to start, and even you aren't completely certain. So I think that's the uncertainty that is causing some angst. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that is a fair assessment, and farmers live with a lot of uncertainty year after year. Obviously, that's why we, as a sophisticated nation, provide safety nets for our agricultural producers, because we need to protect our food supply.
Let me ask you this, sir, because Eugene Grainer, I haven't seen this video, but he put out a video today and sort of alluded to that, corn just continues to not move. And he said maybe the MFP payments actually hurt the markets. Is there a chance that the MFP payments have hurt the demand for markets and kept prices low?
Well, anytime you're paid for a product that you grow but you don't have to sell, obviously it's going to have a market distorting effect. A lot of people were concerned about that, but I think we have to appreciate the extraordinary circumstances we were under, because of the trade negotiations with China and China's what I consider unfair but very targeted retaliation at the heartland of America. It was appropriate that the government step in and provide these payments to help farmers get to the next year and to the next both lending and growing season. So while not ideal, it's still I think an appropriate safety net, considering that it was the government itself and its negotiation that used that as leverage to be able to bridge these negotiations. So Eugene certainly has a point, and he knows commodity markets better than anybody I know. But I think in the long run, in the total context, the MFP was still not just appropriate, but important.
Thank you for that. Now let's move on to the coronavirus. You mentioned that the Chinese already knew about this when they were signing the phase 1 part, but didn't say anything. How do you see, or do you have any idea how this coronavirus could impact exports of ag going over there?
It's an interesting question, Chris, because the reality is we're the ones that have the safe, reliable food supply, and that's bearing out in a big way on the global stage right now. In fact, in my view, China, as a result of other diseases, most specifically, of course, this swine flu disease, African swine flu disease, has made our hogs very valuable, because it's a form of protein that they're used to raising themselves, but they've lost much of their own supply, and so they're having to purchase. There can be opportunity in the long run with some of this, but right now they're dealing with the crisis as it's happening, and it's having a detrimental impact on their own markets. It's certainly affecting the supply chain of various things, maybe not directly with regard to, say, livestock or some other agricultural product, but certainly indirectly by the fact that just a lot of people aren't working right now and the supply chain is being broken up. In the long run, Chris, I believe it presents opportunity, because our stability, our, again, safe, reliable, and low-cost food supply becomes all the more valuable in the marketplace when you see what's going on in China, which is probably why they try to keep it so secret, and they continue to be somewhat secretive about it, quite honestly, and that's a problem.
Senator, you talked about the food supply chain, but I think also the manufacturing supply chain. Is there a conversation now for you, for President Trump to have a conversation with our manufacturing companies, say, hey guys, get out of China, because now it's hurting your business. Come here where you've got good reliability, good regulations. Can that conversation take place and bring more manufacturing jobs back in the United States?
Because I don't think there's any question about it. We like cheap stuff, right? And we're consumers. We like cheap stuff. But when cheap stuff isn't reliable, or cheap stuff is disrupted on a regular basis by regulation or lack of sanitation or whatever the case might be, disease, obviously there's a price to that. And I don't think there's any question that the United States looks like a better place to invest than China right now, and that can be seized upon. I'm not sure it requires a big sales pitch, however. I think it's fairly obvious. Our challenge in the United States right now is not that we can't do it, it's the workforce challenges that we have. And so we've got to deal with workforce. Now we're seeing record low unemployments, record employment, even more available workforce getting into the workplace, but we still have a lot of demand, a lot more demand. As you know, there's more jobs open than there are people looking for work in the United States.
Senator, I want to visit about the Roger Stone's sentencing situation. There was a new piece out today by John Kelly saying that Lieutenant Colonel Vindeman did exactly the right thing. Before we get to that, this just broke. Pretty much while we're having this conversation, but Attorney General Bill Barr has now said in an interview with ABC, Donald Trump has never asked me to do anything in a criminal case, but should stop tweeting about the Justice Department because his tweets make it impossible for me to do my job. Your response, sir?
I hadn't seen this before, but one of the concerns I have had with regard to what Attorney General Barr is saying, and it goes back to a conversation I had with another Trump appointee one time, and that is, if the president tweets something out, it doesn't prevent anybody from doing the right thing. If the president tweets something and say wanting them to do the right thing, that doesn't prevent them from doing the right thing. If he tweets something out and it's the wrong thing, it still doesn't prevent Bill Barr or anybody else from doing the right thing. The president has every right to express himself as anybody else does. It's just that when he expresses himself, it can send some confusing political signals and make something that is not political appear political in nature. That said, we should all stop being surprised that Donald Trump tweets. You can call it the new normal or call it whatever you want, but I can see why the Attorney General might be a little bit frustrated when the President tweets. This example, the Roger Stone one, is a good example. The decision to intervene on behalf of a really bad and extreme sentencing of Roger Stone had been made the night before the president tweeted about it the next day. But the appearance it gives to the general public is that somehow the right thing was done for the wrong reasons, and the reality is that's an unfair judgment, but it's easy to see why it might be that way.
Do you support President Trump removing Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and his twin brother?
Absolutely do. And I like John Kelly. He's a great patriot, and I think he served the president quite well as chief of staff. But I do think so because, and here's the reason, Chris. And you and I talked about this several months ago, as I recall. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman went outside of the chain of command. In fact, his immediate supervisor and that person's supervisor both testified differently than the lieutenant colonel himself did. And so when you're wearing the nation's uniform, you're in something as sensitive as the National Security Council, and then to testify against the president in a hearing that was designed to bring charges against the president, when your only objection by his own testimony was he disagreed with the president's policy position, that's not appropriate for a subordinate in the National Security Council. The job of that person and the National Security Council is to advise the president on national security and then implement the policies the president comes up with. It's not their job to undermine it. So no, I think he was well within his rights to get rid of him.
So, Senator, let me share a theory with you, and you can poke holes in it, please. But this whole sentencing thing feels like a setup to me. It doesn't seem like it's a mistake that it came out right after impeachment. They come up with an egregious, 7 to 9 years on something that should have never been that. And then they can look like the martyrs by going, oh, we're going to leave. We're going to, remove ourselves because this Justice Department isn't being ran the right way. To now set up where you've got calls for AG Barr to resign or to be impeached, I believe because they're scared of what Durham's going to show. What say you?
I think your theory is not just plausible, but likely. I mean, give me a break. Four career professionals, as they call them, I call them bureaucrats, who provided, recommendation of a 9-year prison sentence to a guy because they caught him lying to Congress. Are you kidding me? Do you know how many people lie to Congress every single day in committee hearings? And then they, with self-righteousness, march out the door and say, they resign in protest. Give me a break. I mean, they're the ones that are abusing the law. And by the way, why would anybody be surprised that Donald Trump is suspicious of the FBI and the Justice Department? I mean, let's remember that before he was president of the United States, the FBI got 2 or 4 warrants, 2 already proven to be gotten fraudulently based on a false dossier. And he's been under investigation by them ever since. And there's no reason in the world that we wouldn't distrust career bureaucrats at the FBI or at the Justice Department. We need to clean the place up.
Senator Cramer. Thank you very much to Senator Cramer. I want to remind you it is Giving Hearts Day today. So when we come back, a couple very special guests.